Welcome to another episode of Deep True Crime. I'm Manny Rodriguez. In today's episode, we're diving into the Jill Dando story. This happened in 1999. A well known BBC journalist is shot dead right on her porch, her step, as she's getting ready to go inside her home. And so we're diving into this shocking case. But here's the thing, someone had been convicted of this crime. And then after a second trial, they were innocent. And so there's still no one serving time, or should I say, this true crime story is still unsolved today. Let's go ahead and dive into what do we know at this time of the Jill Dando story. Jill Wendy Dando, born on November 9th of 1961, was an English journalist, television presenter, and newsreader known for her extensive career at the BBC. She was honored as the corporation's Personality of the Year in 1997. During the time of her untimely demise, she was co-presenting the BBC One program Crimewatch alongside Nick Ross, pictured here with her. Tragically, on the morning of April 26, 1999, Dando was fatally shot outside her home residence in Fulham, southwest London. This incident led to a large-scale murder investigation by the Metropolitan Police, marking the country's most significant criminal inquiry since the search for the Yorkshire Ripper. Now, Barry George, a local resident, was initially convicted and served 8 years in prison for the murder before being acquitted after an appeal and retrial. To date, no other individual has been charged in connection with Dando's untimely death, and the case remains unsolved. Now, Jill Wendy Dando, she was born at Ashcombe House Maternity Home in Weston-super-Mare, Somerset, to parents Jack Dando and Winifred Mary Jean Hockey. Now, her dad, Jack, would die in February of 2009, with this case being unsolved and all the different emotions that he went through. Now, her mom, she died in January of 1986. She sadly passed away from leukemia at the age of 57. Now, Jill, she did have one brother, Nigel, born in 1952, who worked as a journalist for BBC Radio Bristol before retiring in 2017. And previously, he had a career in local newspapers dating back to the 1970s. So when it comes to newscasting and being a journalist, this was something that ran in their family. Now, Dando, she was raised as a Baptist and maintained her devout religious beliefs throughout her whole life. At the age of 3, she was diagnosed with a congenital heart condition consisting of a hole in her heart and a blocked pulmonary artery. On January 12th of 1965, she underwent heart surgery to address these health concerns. Her education comprised attendance at Worley Infant School, Greenwood Junior School, Worley Comprehensive School, and Brodock Sixth Form Center, where she held the position of head girl. She was a great student throughout her life. She successfully completed her A levels before pursuing a degree in journalism at Cardiff Metropolitan University. Now, outside of her professional endeavors, Dando was involved in the Weston Supermare Amateur Dramatic Society and the Exeter Little Theatre Company. And she showcased her talent for acting in various stage plays at the Barnfield Theatre. Additionally, in 1979, she devoted her time as a volunteer at Sunshine Hospital Radio in Weston Supermare. Dando's initial employment involved working as a trainee reporter for the local weekly newspaper, the Weston Mercury, where her father and brother were also employed. And following a successful 5-year career in print journalism, she transitioned to the BBC, where she assumed the role of a newsreader for the BBC Radio Divan in 1985. And during the same year, she relocated to BBC Southwest, where she hosted a regional news magazine program called Spotlight Southwest. And subsequently, in 1987, she made the move to Television Southwest before joining BBC Spotlight in Plymouth. And in early 1988, Dando progressed from regional to national television in London to present BBC television news, specifically the short on the hour bulletins featured on both BBC One and BBC Two from the mid 1990s. And throughout her career, she presented various BBC television programs, including Breakfast Time, Breakfast News, the BBC 1 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, the travel program Holiday, the crime appeal series Crimewatch from 1995 until her passing, and occasionally songs of praise. Now, in 1994, she relocated to Fulham, which is her last resident that she owned before she was trying to sell it. And on April of 1995, on April 25th, 1999, she hosted the premiere episode of Antiques Inspectors. As you can see, a little image from that clip. The following day, she was scheduled to present the 6 o'clock news. She was also featured on the cover of Radio Times magazine for that week from April 24th to April 30th. And additionally, Dando had been selected to co-host the British Academy Television Awards in 1999 alongside Michael Parkinson at Grosvenor House Hotel on May 9th. And on September 5th, BBC One resumed airing Antiques Inspectors, which was the final series recorded by Dando. The series had debuted on April 25th, with filming of the last episode concluded 2 days prior to that. And after her untimely passing, the program was initially canceled, but it was later decided that it should be broadcast as a tribute to Dando. The final episode aired on October 24th. At the time of her death, Dando was one of the highest profile BBC on-screen staff members and had received the esteemed 1997 BBC Personality of the Year award. Crimewatch, which is something she was very well known for, they reconstructed her murder in an effort to assist the police in their search for the perpetrator. And following the acquittal of Barry George, who had been charged with a murder, Crimewatch did not make any further appeals for information regarding the case. They thought it was closed. And from 1989 to 1996, Dando was in a relationship with BBC executive Bob Wheaton. And following that relationship, she briefly dated National Park Warden Simon Basil until she would meet the guy she was almost later to marry. In December of 1997, Dando had a chance meeting with gynecologist Alan Farthing, who would later become Queen Elizabeth II's personal physician through a blind date arranged by a mutual acquaintance. And at the time, Farthing was already separated from his spouse. And after a few months, once his divorce was finalized, the couple made an announcement on January 31st of 1999 revealing that they were engaged. They planned to tie the knot on September 25th of 1999. Unfortunately, on the morning of April 26, 1999, Miss Dando leaves the residence of Mr. Farthing, her fiance, in Chiswick. If you look on this image that I got from Daily Mail, you can see where she would start her journey in the number one part. This is where she leaves the fiance's home in Chiswick, West London, in her dark blue BMW convertible. She returns to her own house in Fulham, which is number 7. Basically, her last stop that morning when she's out and about. And so she returns to her own house in Fulham, which she was in the process of selling, and she didn't really visit that place very often because she's engaged, she's staying at her fiance's home, and so she very rarely is at this home in Fulham. So that's why she's trying to sell it, right? She's getting married, things are changing. At approximately 11:32, as Miss Dando reaches her front door, she was tragically shot in the head. Her body was discovered approximately 14 minutes later by her neighbor, Miss Doble. The police were contacted at 11:47. Miss Dando was immediately taken to the nearby Charing Cross Hospital, where she was pronounced dead upon arrival at 1:03 their time. Now, according to Bob Woofenden of The Guardian, as Miss Dando was about to enter her home, she was suddenly attacked from behind and forced to the ground. The assailant then fired a single shot at her left temple, resulting in her instant death. Forensic analysis revealed that she was shot by a 9mm short caliber semi automatic pistol pressed directly against her head at the time of the incident. The bullet's cartridge appear to have undergone modifications, potentially for reduced power. Now, one neighbor, Mr. Hughes, reported hearing a scream but did not hear the gunshot. He observed a tall white man in his 40s walking away from Miss Dando's house, making him the sole reliable witness of the perpetrator. Now, following a highly publicized murder, there was extensive media coverage surrounding the incident. The Metropolitan Police launched an investigation known as Operation Oxborough, which unfortunately remained inconclusive for more than a year. Now, the victim, Miss Dando, was a prominent public figure, having had contact with numerous individuals and a vast audience of millions. The motive behind her murder sparked significant speculation as no one had answers. Within a 6-month period, the dedicated murder investigation team interviewed over 2,500 individuals and obtained over 1,000 statements. However, with little progress made, the focus of the police shifted towards Barry George, a resident living in close proximity to Miss Dando's residence. George, having a history of stalking women, sexual offenses, and engaging in antisocial and attention seeking behavior, he became a key person of interest after a tip came in. As a result, surveillance was initiated, leading to his arrest on May 25th, 2000, and subsequent charges for Miss Dando's murder on May 28th. George's trial would take place at the Old Bailey, resulting in his conviction and sentencing to life imprisonment on July 2nd, 2001. However, Concerns surrounding the strength of the case against George were widespread. Two unsuccessful appeals followed until new evidence discrediting the previously utilized forensic evidence was excluded from the prosecution's case. Eventually, George's third appeal in November of 2007 proved successful. Consequently, the original conviction was overturned and a second trial lasting 8 weeks led to George's acquittal on August 1st, 2008. And following his acquittal, certain newspaper articles appeared to imply that George's guilt regarding the Dando murder and other offenses against women. And in December of 2009, George reached a settlement for substantial damages with News Group newspapers, resulting from a little action in the High Court regarding articles published in both The Sun and the News of the World. And prior to his now overturned conviction, he had already attracted police interest due to a number of brushes with the law, including convictions for indecent assault and attempted rape, and being found in the grounds of Kensington Palace. That's the home of Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Rest in peace to Princess Diana. He was discovered hiding in the grounds wearing a balaclava and carrying a poem that he had written to Prince Charles. He was found by the Royal Protection Squad, but no charges ever came of the incident. Mr. George, who was diagnosed as having Asperger's syndrome before the trial. Yes, he was diagnosed as that. Now, there are a lot of lines of inquiry as to what could have possibly happened in this mystery. So, there was the theories that a jealous ex-boyfriend or an unknown lover had killed Dando. Now, this was quickly ruled out by the detectives who interviewed all of Dando's friends and acquaintances and checked her phone calls. There was also a belief that somebody had hired an assassin to murder Dando as revenge for their being convicted as a result of evidence garnered by Crimewatch viewers. After exhaustive inquiries, this was also ruled out by detectives. There were various theories that were relating to Bosnian Serb or Yugoslav groups in retaliation for NATO actions against media outlets and her appeals for aid during the Yugoslav wars. And so you also had the possibility that a deranged fan may have killed Dando after she had rejected his approaches. Now, Dando's brother Nigel informed detectives that she had become concerned by some guy pestering her in the few days before her death, but this was ruled out by detectives. There was also the case of mistaken identity. This was judged unlikely given that the killing took place on the doorstep of Dando's own home. Now, there was also another theory following the Jimmy Savile sexual abuse scandal. A claim was made that Dando had investigated a PETA, you know what, ring at the BBC during the mid 1990s and had handed a dossier containing her findings to BBC management, purportedly prompting a revenge attack. Now, the BBC themselves said it had seen no evidence to support this claim. There was also actions that had been taken by a professional, rival, or business partner also had to be considered. Now, her agent, John Roseman, stated that he had been interviewed as a suspect by police. And so a lot of these theories were debunked, leaving continuous no answers. And we'll dive in a little deeper here into that. You see, the initial police investigation considered the possibility of a planned assassination, but it was deemed unlikely that a professional hitman would have had detailed knowledge of Dando's whereabouts given her living arrangements and infrequent visits to her Fulham residence. There was also surveillance footage from a shopping center in Hammersmith where Dando had stopped during her journey to Fulham, and it did not reveal any signs of her being followed. Now, following her death, her colleague Nick Ross stated on Newsnight that it was uncommon for criminals to carry out retaliatory attacks against law enforcement, lawyers, or any of the judges in the UK. An analysis of the cartridge case and bullet found at the crime scene suggested that the weapon used may have been a modified or decommissioned gun or of subpar quality. This would further cast doubt on the involvement of a professional assassin. Now, consequently, the police began to lean towards the theory that the murder was committed by an individual acting impulsively and opportunistically. Based on new evidence, including a review of the case in 2008, the police did conclude that Dando was the target of a professional hitman conducting a hard contact execution. And it was believed that pressing that gun against her head would have suppressed the sound of the gunshot and prevented excessive blood splatter on the killer. In 2012, a cold case review implicated the late Serbian warlord Arkan as a potential suspect, albeit without the opportunity for investigation due to his death. And so there was a Yugoslav connection. See, regarding the murder of the journalist, a call was received by the BBC from an unidentified individual, potentially from Eastern Europe, at around 3 p.m. on the day of Dando's murder. The caller made a remark suggesting that there were still more individuals to be targeted, referencing the tragic event in Belgrade where 15 people lost their lives. And it is believed that the caller was alluding to the NATO bombing that took place on April 23rd of 1999, resulting in the deaths of several prominent journalists. And during the early months of 1999, the UK and NATO were involved in the Kosovo war, with Serbia being the opposing force. Soon after Dando's murder, a number of phone calls were made to the BBC and other media organizations claiming responsibility for the act on behalf of Serbian groups. These calls cited revenge for the NATO bombing campaign in Serbia and issued threats of future violence. However, the credibility of these calls was doubted and they could potentially have just been hoaxes. Nonetheless, at George's initial trial, his defense lawyer, Michael Mansfield, suggested that the assassination of Dando had been ordered by Serbian warlord Arkan as a response to the NATO bombing of the RTS headquarters. And Mansfield proposed that Dando's previous appeal for aid for Kosovar Albanian refugees may have attracted the attention of hardline Bosnian Serb individuals. The appeal had been broadcast on television 3 weeks prior to her murder. In 2019, there were reports that surfaced that the British National Criminal Intelligence Service had provided an intelligence report to the Dando murder investigation, stating that the killing was a retaliatory act for the RTS bombing and that Arkan had ordered it. And the report, it highlighted a potential connection between the bullet that was used in Dando's murder and bullets used in other assassinations in Germany, specifically due to the handmade markings found on them. There was a journalist, Slavko, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Kuruviha, was also assassinated outside his home in Belgrade shortly before Dando's murder, with the same method being employed in both cases. Four Serbian Secret Service agents were convicted of Slavkov's murder in 2019. And journalist Bob Waffenden put forth the belief that a Yugoslav group was responsible for Dando's killing and contested the reasons given by the police for dismissing this possibility in various newspaper articles. Dando's garden in Weston-super-Mare, Dando's funeral, where it took place on May 21st, 1999. You can see it here, an image of the garden. This was a place she loved to be at. She was buried next to her mother in the town's Ebden Road Cemetery. And you can see the tribute. Jean Dando, which is her mom, you were truly wonderful, now so sadly missed. Rest in peace, sweetheart. Jill Dando, 1961 to 1999, your beautiful smile, that unaffected elegance, a genuine star. We love you. And it's cases like this as to why I do this, because this victim needs as many voices, because if this is an unsolved murder, we need to bring some peace here. Now, Dando's co-presenter, Nick Ross, proposed the formation of an academic institute in her name, and together with her fiance, Alan Farthing, raised almost 1.5 million euro dollars. The Jill Dando Institute of Crime Science was founded at University College London on April 26, 2001, the second anniversary of her murder. A memorial garden designed and realized by the BBC television ground force team in Dando's memory, using plants and colors that were special to her, is located within Grove Park, Weston-super-Mare, and was opened on August 2nd of 2001. The BBC set up a bursary award in Dando's memory, which enables one student each year to study broadcast journalism at University College Falmouth. Sophie Long, who was then a postgraduate who had grown up in Weston-super-Mare and is now a presenter on BBC News, gained the first bursary award in 2000. And in 2007, Weston College opened a new university campus on the site of the former Broad Oak Sixth Form Center where Dando studied. The sixth form building had been dedicated to her and named the Jill Dando Center. And police, they continued to appeal for assistance. Rest in peace, Jill Dando, taken from this world way too soon. We have to ask ourselves, what could have possibly been it's like, think about all of this that has gone on. Okay, we're talking about 23 years later, and one man convicted and why do you suppose they were looking so hard at George? Like, literally, they were literally studying him. He was known as a loner, an oddball, he even had a history of harassing women, but he consistently insisted that he did not kill Jill. Now, if you think about at any time, then there you look at all the theories that have come about in 23 years as to what happened to Jill Dando. And you take that into how quickly we can easily jump to conclusions. Oh, they got Barry George in custody. He must have done it. Right? I'll be honest, I don't think he had anything to do with this. Not because he was, obviously people do get their conviction overturned only to find out they were guilty. It does happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen, right? They're not always still guilty when it's overturned. But when you think about this in particular, like, you have to take into account, like, we have to give them the benefit of the doubt sometimes. There are weird people that don't go to the extent of murdering someone. But, they didn't even really have much. They had like gunpowder. We gotta be careful with these type of situations. We don't want the wrong people to be suffering from all of this, right? But at the same time, we want the right people in jail. Jill Dando was taken from this world, and it does not make any sense. Why? What happened? So we have to ask, someone had to be tracking her, is my thought. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you know about this case? Do you follow this case? Let me know in the comments, what do you think? If you've been following this, what do you think happened? But someone to know when she was about to arrive, did they know she was going to that home? Because she starts in one, she barely goes to this home, but yet, hmm, there was an Operation Oxborough, which this was what it was called for the investigation of Jill Dando. And so detectives that were investigating this murder, they were looking for any type of clues, right? But how about the tracking of her phone? Could someone had been tracking her phone? That's what I kind of wondered too, because someone had to know when she was about to pull up there. I mean, you're talking about someone who was well known, right? Someone who was well known. It is said that in 1999, Scotland Yard investigated evidence that someone purporting to be her brother tried to access personal details from the utility companies 3 months before she was killed. Could that help with hacking? And so this Operation Oxborough, they had come to the conclusion this was most likely the result of tabloid journalists trying to track down her new address after Dando had announced her engagement to Alan Farthing. And again, this was an address that she did not frequent. She was in the process of selling it, right? And so we don't know what else, but they had to have been tracking her for this timely killing when she pulls up to her home, when she's about to open the door. How does that happen unless it's random? But if it's random, I think they would have caught this person by now. Someone had to have wanted her dead, or someone has an answer for this. Is again, one of the reasons why I created this channel is so I can play detective. So you're gonna hear me play detective as well, because I'm obviously not a good detective, but you have to play these things in your mind, like, what if, what could possibly have happened, right? And so you got to think about the timeline. She's killed with a single shot to the head from a 9mm semi-automatic pistol within seconds of parking her car and approaching her door to her home in Gowan Avenue in Fulham. And again, who would have known she was there? Who would have known that she was about to pull up? Who would have known that she was on her way there? And because she didn't live there anymore, she moved in with her fiance in Chiswick months before that. And you're talking about there was so much searches through the CCTV and eyewitness reports. Detectives found no evidence that Dando was followed when she left her new home from Chiswick around 10 a.m. before arriving at the doorstep to her old flat an hour and a half later. And so it's hard to understand. And so the only eyewitness that I shared with you is from a postman who was delivering to her house in Fulham around 10 a.m., who said he believed that he was being watched by a man in a dark suit. And he said at the time of Dando's murder, it's like there was so much going on. But they looked through her phone records, they looked through the voicemails, and they found nothing that can go through this. And so why it's like, did she have a stalker? Did she have an assassin who was a professional? But they kind of written off the professional part of it. So you think about all the theories that can go around this. I want to hear your theory, because right now, with this being an unsolved murder, come on, we need to put as many theories to this so that something can be tracked down. Jill did not deserve this, right? She was a young lady ready to live her life. She had so much more life to live. She was so great at what she did. And so we don't understand why this could happen, but we do know that no one is paying for this. And so I ask you, what do you think happened? Let me know in the comments your thought process on this. My friends, I'm Manny Rodriguez. The whole purpose of this is so that I can be another voice for the victims, so that I can help you stay aware of what could go wrong in this crazy world we live in, to help you stay more alert, to help you stay more aware, to help you have to know, like, hey, I gotta look over my shoulder and see what's going on around me. Don't be blind. You never know what can happen to you. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Deep True Crime. I'm Manny Rodriguez. Until next time, my friends, peace. Have a great Labor Day and have a great week.